Good morning and welcome to Big Bets on Campus Live. It's 10:30 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. I'm Stuckey. Joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-host, Mike Calabrese, Greg Waddell. We'll get to two best bets each today, throw out our favorite Moneyline underdogs. We are just 6 days away from the CIT semifinal. No, just kidding. But that is played on Friday. 5 days away from the tournament. Tomorrow we will have a bracket, the bracket that will run all of our lives for the next 4 days, trying to figure out who advances, who's going to the Final Four, who's going to win it all. Can't wait. Nothing better. And then, of course, the first weekend of the tournament with nonstop action. Before we get to our first best bets, the conference tournament week that has been so far, just a key takeaway or two. I'll go to each of you. Greg, I'll start with you. Feel free to go wherever you want with this.
Man, I think at a broad level, my takeaway is that college hoop teams have made caring cool again. We talk so much about how conference tournament week is like who's motivated for this and who's not. And I think most of the very best teams in the country at the high major level have come super motivated for this tournament, even when they haven't needed to. We've got St. John's, Creighton, the top two seeds in the Big East. St. John's didn't necessarily need this. They're not moving off the two line. And here they are sweeping teams that they swept in the regular season, punking everybody, looking great in the process. Michigan State doing a similar thing in the Big Ten through one game. Just grinding teams out, exactly playing true to who they've been, the better teams in these leagues. In the SEC, we've got the top four seeds still available. Everybody talked about how much of a gauntlet this was, but so far, Auburn looks like they certainly want this one as well. I think caring is cool, gentlemen. That's where I'm at with this. As much as we love upsets and underdogs and chaos, it's also really fun to watch the very best teams in college basketball show up motivated and play to that level. Even in the Big East last night when Creighton beats UConn and lets them hear about it and gets a little testy, this is what I live for, and I think all college basketball fans are probably standing in line with me.
Yeah, Hurley had that coming to him after the win in Creighton. Yeah, very chalky conference tournament week this week. I think we could have 14 of the 17 conference tournament championships will be either between a 1 and 2 or a 1 and 3, depending on what happens with the semifinals in a few this week. So yeah, the ones and twos have held serve in many of the leagues so far. Greg, to kind of play devil's advocate to your point, we did see kind of the opposite of that with teams that are dealing with injuries. And I think it's smart. You had a few teams just say, like, look, we're not going to risk any further injury to key guys. The tournament is next week. And you had Texas Tech, Iowa State, Missouri. I mean, Gates came out and just said, like, look, we're not risking any further injury to Mitchell. So I was kind of hypothesizing that maybe the the bigger conferences, those conference tournaments should be smaller, and you just reduce injury risk. You increase that care across the board, even if you are dealing with a nagging injury or two. Like, did we really need the ACC, 14, 15, 16 seeds in there? I still think we should have the big conference tournaments for the smaller conferences, and you want to penalize the teams who performed worse in league play in those one bid leagues. But yeah, I think that's just something that I took away. And there were a lot of injuries. That's going to be something we all need to pay attention to before next week, because there's 8 or 9 tournament teams that have potential injuries that could be pretty impactful. So we'll definitely be covering that this week. We have podcasts coming out, big bets on campus throughout the week, starting Tuesday and then more on Wednesday. Calabrese, any key takeaway from you?
Well, two parts. One, I think it's important this time of year to separate regular season performance, not just by teams, but also by coaches. You can see it that there's just some coaches who thrive in these formats where they have quick turnaround. They don't know exactly who they're game planning for the next game, but they clearly are a step ahead of their, opponents. And also, Evan Mia put out this lovely graphic that essentially shows teams' overall depth and the drop off from their best player in terms of his Bayesian, performance rating all the way to their eighth player. And that makes a huge difference in terms of going to your bench when you're playing, your third game in 3 days. And obviously in March Madness, at least you get that one day off, but the turnaround is still important to consider. The other part of it is you can see it in some of these games. Teams aren't just throwing up the white flag if they're down, 8, 10 points in the final 2 minutes, where they may do that during the regular season. And they're pressing teams that they just look like they're not prepared. I'll just say this as a St. Joe's fan. They were up 10 late in the game against Dayton, blew it, ended up going to overtime because it looked as though they had never handled press. And I know we like to throw dirt on Billy Lang, and I was ready to say some real choice things. They pulled out in overtime. But I think it's important to realize that there's teams that just have more experience playing against press, breaking it. Eventually, in overtime, he threw out some different strategies. He had players on the baseline, kind of doing that like football pass down court. But it's interesting to see how some of these coaches handle the stress of the single elimination format, and some just thrive and some wilt. And I think for that reason, with so much analytical data and these resumes and everything, you need to at least put a qualifier on it and be like, how do these teams play in a tournament setting, and kind of give that to be at least a tiebreaker when you're starting to look at teams next week.
Yeah, coaching obviously matters more when these teams get out of league play. Teams that can switch it up defensively, change things offensively. Those teams are always primed to do well in a tourney setting. Let's get to today's action and get to our first best bets. Calabrese, I'll throw it back to you. Where you headed?
I'm going to start with the massive showdown in the Big West. Are we potentially going to get two teams out of this low major league? I think the only way we get there is if UC Irvine wins on a buzzer beater and the committee, sneaks UC San Diego in as the last at-large team. But I actually think San Diego is primed for a blowout win here. This number continues to bubble up at 6.5 out in the market. And I think the reason for it is that for all of the strengths that the Anteaters possess, and really, it starts on the defensive end. They have a fortress-like interior defense. They are number one in terms of defending shots at the rim in the entire country, thanks to Bent Lucan, their 7'1", 265-pound German big. But UC San Diego doesn't care. They're going to bomb away from the 3-point arc, take those shots. And if they're falling, then I think this is a potential runaway, because you balance that with the fact that they are one of the best turnover margin teams in the entire country. They can go a game like this and turn it over 4 or 5 times, which really helps them balance out the fact that they do nothing on the offensive glass. Once again, that's something that UC Irvine thrives with. They get stops and they get the boards, but UC San Diego doesn't necessarily need that. So if the 3-point volume is working for them and those shots are falling, and they also add in what they do in transition, their top 30 in fast break points, I think the Tritons could win this one going away. And what's interesting is they just controlled their last game in the Big West tournament, and the threes weren't falling. So that speaks to what they've been able to do defensively. UC Irvine, as much as I really like them on the defensive end, they can go through lulls offensively. They have a bit of issue in terms of creativity and going to, different elements of their offense. So I'm going to go with UCSD here to win by 10 plus going away, to lock up the automatic bid, and unfortunately to kill the dream of two teams out of the Big West.
Please take care of business, Trends. I don't want to be sweating tomorrow night at 6 p.m. on whether or not you get in, because I would really love to see them in the field. Greg, you're going to Big Ten country.
I am, and I'm going to take a total here. I'm going to take the under 150.5 is what I got it at for Maryland and Michigan here. Look, Michigan impressed me against Purdue. That was my pre-tournament pick, as you guys know. They looked completely worn down. That played a much larger factor than I anticipated, with Braden and TKR just coming up short on a lot of jumpers. But more importantly, Michigan's offensive resurgence in that game was entirely Purdue having zero answers on the defensive end. This Purdue defense, 362nd nationally in 2-point percentage defense since January 1st. It's not even a sample size anymore. It's who they are. They are that bad. And Michigan took full advantage, but the confidence that those guards and wings built as that game rolled on, as Michigan built out a 10-point lead playing through the post, I think is not something that is going to apply against a Maryland team that matches up really well with Michigan. The first time these two teams met just over a week ago in Ann Arbor, it finished at 138 total points. And then you talk about Maryland. Yesterday, they were phenomenal against Illinois, shot 48% from 3, benched their starters the final 10 minutes of that game, got guys a little extra added rest, but I'll just buy that they won't go nuclear from 3-point range again from the start. Rodney Rice was making threes, falling down, faking injuries, getting up and hitting them. It was a crazy shooting performance from Maryland. If we just get a little bit of reversion to the mean there, two teams with no depth, Michigan's legs could be gassed a little bit after yesterday. Maryland certainly maybe two. Second game in 2 days for both these teams. I think the number's way too high. I'll take the under.
I'm going to also stay in Big Ten country. I'm going to go with the Badgers catching 3.5 against Michigan State. I don't think that there's much separating these teams at all. I mean, we can just go back to earlier this month. Wisconsin was catching, I believe, closed around 4 in East Lansing. They were without Klesmit, and their offense and defense is better with Klesmit, and also their rotation kind of gets set with him back. They were in that game late on the road, despite shooting 5 of 32 from 3. What can Wisconsin do well? They can limit transition. They can limit you at the rim. That's important. Are they going to shoot like they did yesterday? Would they finish 19 of 32? Something 19 of 30 or 19 of 32 from 3? Probably not. But, I mean, I think it's actually a good thing. Saw the ball go in the hoop that many times on the same court the next day. And someone's eventually going to make a 3 against Michigan State. Teams are shooting just 25% from 3 since February 1st. Yet still, over that span, Wisconsin, per Torvik, been a better team. So I just think this is a coin flip game. One thing that concerns me is the depth. And, Wisconsin has played one extra game. Michigan State has depth for days. So maybe they put a run on it in the second half, but I just can't get to this number. So I am rolling with the Badgers. Greg, I know you're always in tune with the Big Ten. What do you think happens in that game?
I think you have the right read on this. All reasoning makes sense of why Wisconsin has the value where the number's at, but it feel like there's some voodoo with Michigan State at this point? Like, Stuck, I just will not be surprised if Wisconsin does roll out of bed and make 5 out of 33s again. Like, I don't know what horseshoe the Spartans have, but it's just been the story of the season at this point. And the last thing I wanted to see as someone that had circled a potential Wisconsin win in this game outright was them going nuclear from 3 yesterday, right?
Yeah. I want to just make the first one. If they miss the first, if they start 0 of 8, because the other thing is when these teams can't shoot, these teams can't make threes against Michigan State, where Michigan State is so deadly in transition. Yeah. And you have all these missed threes. A lot of times it's going to kick out their transition game. So yeah, Wisconsin, just do what you did yesterday. Same thing. Just do it again today. It shouldn't be that difficult. All right, before we get to some Moneyline underdogs, March, it's the best month of the year, not just for sports, but also for getting the best deal on Action Pro. You can get Action Pro for just over $5 a month for the entire year. And for the NCAA tournament, you'll get Sean Krenner's bracket simulations, Nick Giffin's player props. He was on fire yesterday, usually has a huge march in those. And if you care about my picks 30 minutes before they go out to everyone else, go to actionnetwork.com/March now to get on board. That's actionnetwork.com/March. Shout out to Nick. I think he went 10-3 yesterday on his player prop. So make sure you check him out in the Action app. Also, I'll tweet this out later today, but 2 weeks from today, Elite 8 watch party in Chicago. Joe's on weed. We'll have myself, Jim Root, and the other guys from the 3-man weave. I think we'll be there, but myself and Jim will be doing an Elite 8 preview, watch games, have some drinks. Shout out to our sponsor, Bet365, on that. And you have to RSVP. It's free, but just RSVP the link. I'll tweet out. Hope to see some of you there. But let's get to some Moneyline underdog looks for today. Calabrese, I will throw it to you to kick things off.
UAB over North Texas is where I'm headed. The Blazers were a team that I was really high on in the preseason, and then they came out of the gate 3-4 straight up. And a big reason for that was that big Yaxel was not getting any support from his guards surrounding him. They lose some games that looked ugly early. They lose to Vermont. They lose to High Point, who's, a team that's proven throughout the season they've been pretty good. But really, it was just a question of, is there any support for Lendenborg this season? And he's finally getting it down the stretch. We just talked about the fact that there's injuries rampant across college basketball. Well, their top 8 players have played every game together this season. That's all 32 games. And that continuity is paying off down the stretch. It doesn't hurt that Yax is now playing at an All-American level, coming off a 30-point, 20 rebounds, 8 assists, 9 stock performance in the last game. That's like Shaquille O'Neal, David Robinson kind of bigs, performance. So that was absolutely insane. But when you look at the 2 meetings, they were both close. They beat UNT by 3 at home despite an awful shooting performance from the exterior, and they hung with them at the Super Pit, which is a very difficult place to win in Denton. The thing that I really took out of it was they can win at North Texas's pace. The Mean Green want to slow this down to a glacial pace. And the thing of it is, if UAB is successful in speeding things up, does UNT have enough offensively to hang around? The other element of it is UNT has one Achilles heel. They're incredible defensively, but you can still get them with second chance buckets. UAB had 27 offensive boards in their 2 meetings, and they're 18th nationally in extra scoring chances per game. So I think that's where this one's going to swing. I think there's too much value on UAB to win this one outright, a team that I've been high on really since, the American Conference play kicked off. And finally, like I said, it's not just Yaxel anymore. Jabari McGee is having a huge March, nearly doubled his scoring average this month. If he can continue to be hot from deep, I think they're going to have the goods to be able to get over the top here. So it could be the Blazers.
Yeah, I like UAB today too. Yaks he he has to stay out of foul trouble. That's always a key thing with UAB. But an absolutely bananas stat line yesterday, as you alluded to. 30 points, 20 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 blocks, 4 steals, no turnovers, I think is what he finished with. That is just a crazy stat line, one of the best of the entire season. Greg, what underdog are you looking at today?
I'm going to do a terrifying thing that I really haven't done at all much this season. I'm going to fade Duke here. I'm going to take Louisville on the money line. I see it at plus 210. Look, the second half against Carolina was terrifying. And I think everyone involved, Duke fans, Shire, the players, everyone just wants to get to the finish line of this tournament. If they win a title, great along the way. But this team is gutted without Cooper Flag. I mean, he's obviously the best player in the country, but it should go without saying that if you remove that guy, it changes this team more than any other team in the country could be changed without one individual player. And without Brown as well, like this 2-point defense just isn't what it is with 2 of the best defenders in the country down low. UNC had a bunch of success. We know how bad that front court is. They shot like 60 something% from 2-point range yesterday. To me, Louisville is a team that if you're going to take a shot on an underdog, you might as well take a team that has a bunch of 3-point variance. This number opening up at 5.5 makes me think there's a chance we get Rain Smith back as a Louisville backer today. He hasn't played in the ACC tournament yet. He's been listed as questionable the entire time. So I don't know. Maybe Pat Kelsey's pulling something there, maybe trying to just get to the championship game and bring him back. But if you're looking for a reason to believe that maybe the coin flip swings our way on shooting, Louisville hasn't had the nuclear shooting game yet. 34%, 27% from 3 in their 2 wins in this tournament. I think they're due for a good game. I think against Duke, you have to shoot threes. They'll be super comfortable shooting all those threes. And if you think about this matchup, they only played once this year. It was a competitive basketball game all the way back in December. Louisville was nowhere close to the team that they've become at that point. They were still fresh off of the prior injury. And they've just gotten really good. They've lost 2 games since then. They've clearly been the better team than Clemson, who was also a team that was able to pick off Duke earlier this season. So at over 2-1, I think it's worth a shot against a Duke team that is a shell of who they can really be in March.
Yeah, obviously Flag is the headliner, but Brown's versatility on defense will definitely be missed in certain matchups. He changed a number of road games for Duke with his defense this year. We saw that against Carolina in the road game about a week ago when what he did to RJ Davis in the second half. So he'll definitely be missed on that end. Key injuries in the ACC worth paying attention to. You have Rain Smith, as you mentioned. He's huge just for their spacing and obviously his shooting. You have Hunter for Clemson. That's a big loss. And then obviously Duke with Brown and Flag, who will be worth monitoring his status moving forward. I'm going to go I'll get a little crazy here, and I'm going to go with Tulane. Maybe Memphis comes out here and lays an egg, but they're playing against a team that'll throw out a lot of junk zone, and maybe Memphis, second game in 2 days, comes out and just settles for a bunch of threes. I think that there's some high variance in this game. The rebounding does concern me a bit, but I think Tulane has a puncher's chance, especially if Memphis is settling all day, and they could force some turnovers here as well. So give me the green wave with a shot to get it done against Memphis. Maybe we'll have a bid stealer in that league. Not a lot of bid stealers so far. Haven't had one of those stories, the NC State last year. I think we had four or five bid stealers last year on this Saturday and Sunday. We'll see if any emerge today or tomorrow, but I think Tulane will have a shot here. Maybe Memphis comes out and isn't very sharp with a tourney bid already locked up. All right, let's get to our final best bet before we get out of here. Calabrese, where you going?
So I'm going to finish this up with Jackson State. They're laying 3.5 against Alabama State. I'm hoping for the rare HBCU two-step. I had Norfolk to win the MEAC tournament. They're in the title game. I have Jackson State here. And to be honest, I'm more proud of Jackson State because at plus 320, I needed one thing to, basically click, and it was Deshaun Ruffin. He has gone absolutely nuclear in this tournament. He is playing out of his mind. He could be good for 25 plus points again. And defensively, they throw out zone to be able to slow down perimeter shooting, and they're playing with incredible energy. They played against Florida A&M, really the only team in the SWAC that is capable of knocking down three-point shots. And their rotations, they're moving around, they're closing out on shooters. They've now cracked the top 50 in terms of opponent shooting percentage when they're rolling out that zone. So I think Mo Williams is going to go to that even more. Another thing that head coach Mo Williams is doing is he's really limited his bench. He's basically said, I don't care if my team's gassed. I'm going to go to a 6-man rotation. Mitchell coming off the bench, who's also been tremendous. He's given them double digits in both games. I think this is a game where Jackson State is going to make another statement. Alabama State is a team that also got really hot down the stretch. They beat Southern, one of the few losses that Southern took the entire year. I just think matchup-wise, Jackson State has more versatility offensively. And like I said, I've been hitching my wagon to Ruffin. I'm not going to get off the locomotive now. I think that the Tigers win this one. We'll call it by 2 possessions.
All right, good luck there. By the way, I should mention the underdogs that we mentioned, Tulane, Louisville, and UAB. If you wanted to parlay them 30-1 on DraftKings, if you want to follow along with that, we'll put a quick slip in the chat. You can easily click it and it'll populate on your book. Greg, where are you going for your second best bet?
I'm going to the Big 12, and I'd like to issue a public service announcement on one of the last days before the NCAA tournament begins that Houston is incredible. Let's not pretend they aren't. They have a better net rating per KenPom than 21 of the last 22 national champions. And this is Duke versus Auburn versus Houston. It's not talked about that way. They've only increased that net rating by a bunch over Big 12 play when they were supposed to suffer some bumps in the road and come back to earth a little bit. The opposite has happened. This team has not lost a game in regulation since the first week of the season. It's a real thing like that. This is insane. They're very good and they're tough and they take you out of everything you do well, as their win over BYU showed yesterday. That game was over in the first 4 minutes. You guys have heard me sing the praises of BYU. Obviously not the most physical team. Arizona's more physical than BYU. Maybe they can hold up a little bit here, but I don't expect them to. Houston won this game in Tucson during the regular season. They have 9 wins versus top 30 teams this year per KenPom. 7 of those 9 wins came by 6 or more points. And you look at what Arizona has done in this Big 12 tournament. It's been very 3-point dependent. They shot 44% from 3 and 50% from 3 in their 2 wins. You're always playing Caleb Love roulette. I'll bet on a bad Caleb Love game against the physicality of the Houston guards. He was 1 for 8 from 3 in the first meeting between these two teams. If that happens again, I don't think on a neutral floor Arizona will have any answers. And I think Houston will close this Big 12 tournament run with a statement that they are definitively one of the 3 teams to beat in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad we didn't get Texas Tech. Well, I just wanted to see Houston, Texas Tech at full strength. But obviously Texas Tech is a shell of itself without McMillan and Williams. So unless we get that in the national championship or Final Four. We'll never get to see that this year because I think those two teams are incredible. And yeah, Houston not getting enough love. I think it's just because they haven't won a national title and they're always this good. But it's pretty difficult to win a national title, right? But that's kind of the stigma that you start to carry as a team that has had a ton of success but hasn't gotten over the hump. But last time I checked, there's only one team that can win it all every year, and it's still the NCAA tournament. But yeah, I think that's part of the reason why Houston doesn't get enough love. For my best bet, my last best bet, I'm going to go with you, AB. I already talked about that earlier. Rolling with the Blazers. Think it'll be a super tight game, like the first two meetings that were both decided by 3 points. Big Yaks, just stay out of foul trouble today. All right, that'll do it for us. Thanks to Greg and Mike. Thanks to our producers in the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you. Bracket release show live, 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. It'll be on YouTube and in the Action Network app. Make sure you check that out. And then we'll have our first round preview. We'll have one for Thursday, one for Friday. We'll even have a separate episode for the first 4 games. Those will all be out Monday and Tuesday. I think 3-Man Weave guys will have an episode too. And then we'll continue the party throughout the tournament. We'll have some live shows as well. But thanks as always for tuning in. Good luck on all of your bets today and tomorrow. And we will see you during the week. Cheers.